So today on the call, you'll be hearing from me, Mary Kathryn Campbell. You can refer to me as MK because it's so long. And my colleague Sian, who is with an organization named Resource Media. And Resource Media is helping us this year with outreach and communications for National Drive Electric Week, as well as my other colleagues and partners in crime, Mary Lunetta and Lantry. And we'll be talking a lot today about how to engage with public relations folks and get media attention for your National Drive Electric Week celebration. So without further ado, let me turn the mic over to my colleague, Sian Wu.
Thanks, MK. And thank you all for joining us. So as you all know, getting PR and news attention for your events is super important because it really helps to elevate and publicize all of the great work that you're doing and spread the word on electric cars. So part of that is reaching out to the news media. That's what we mean by earned media here on this slide. And I'm just going to be talking a little bit about some of the aspects of news stories that the media loves. One is how your event is unique. How is it that it's different from last year? Is it linked to something really hot in the news? Is it a really great visual that maybe they haven't seen before? And new and fun electric cars definitely are included in that great visual category. Is there a lot of public interest? Do you have these RSVPs from hundreds of people who are planning on attending? Is there a local public leader who's attending? That gets to the local influencers. So when you have an elected official or a big local business, for example, that shows the media that this is a big deal to the community. For local landscape, what are some of the issues involving EVs that are happening in your community right now? And how can you tie that in to make it salient and really drive home the message? This is the consumer and the driver side that is demonstrating demand for EVs in our community. And then what are some local compelling stories? So, aim for stories that really dispel myths about EVs, that they're not widely available or that they're super expensive. You can really just dispel some of those stories and reach new demographics through the news media, which is why it's such a great opportunity. So under compelling media coverage, these are just some of the keys to success for compelling media coverage. One is branding, just making sure that you're using the National Drive Electric Week materials and everything is pretty prominent in your signage and your t-shirts and materials, etc., which we'll be providing to you to make sure that everyone really knows who is putting this on. The same goes with any of your co-sponsors or partners. A packed house and engaged crowd, so you want to have lots of people there, super engaged and excited and enthusiastic is ideal. The ideal picture you want to send for the audience that is coming to this event. Diversity is also super important, so making sure that you're reaching out to those community groups as well as ethnic media pubs that may be on your list to ensure that you're really portraying a diverse picture of the EV driver and the EV market in the U.S. Ceremony, so this can mean any sort of thinking about what that visual hook and putting some momentum into the event. So it could be, you're doing a ribbon cutting of some sort or an official opening or christening or something like that of something new and exciting. Really drives media to want to attend and cover that issue on that day versus holding off or waiting for another day. And then entertainment, just not forgetting your public crowd that's attending. And I know that some of the past successful events have really had that sort of festival atmosphere where you're having music and kids activities and things like that that just make it a really fun event that has a lot of public value to putting it on. So here are just some rules of engagement. We want to make sure that you're not using any faux pas as you're reaching out to the media. So one is, making sure that you're going after local reporters and bloggers and editors who would likely cover your event. And so here you want to notice the beats or, the topics that they cover. So it'll be listed in the media list, but look at it. Some communities will have an environment reporter. Some of them may not. Some may have an auto reporter, which would also be a really great target. And some may just have a community reporter or editor. If this is a community event, then this would fall under their category. So pay attention to that. Also just making sure that in terms of the formatting and copying of the text that you're being as clean and legible as possible. So, as you're working within the templates, just make sure that you've got your copy all ready to go. And then when you're copying it into your email, then after that you're fixing any formatting. You could send yourself a test as well just to see how it looks before it goes out to your media list. Sending a clear and concise subject line with the event date is also really important. So, the subject line is often just, can tease a reporter and really compel them to want to open up the email. And if it's too long or sort of doesn't get to the point fast enough, then it'll just sort of get cut off and they'll be less likely to open it. Also, when you're emailing out to a larger list, you want to make sure that you're either emailing them individually, so one email, one recipient, or putting them into a BCC or blind carbon copy in the email fields. So you're putting your list into the BCC, not the CC, because reporters don't like to see which other reporters have received the email outreach because they're very competitive with each other, and that can really just sort of irritate them. Same with exclamation marks. That this is not a urgent fire on the highway kind of story, and often they do receive media advisories that say that they're more urgent than they actually are. So just avoid exclamation marks for that reason. And then also, just keep it short and simple. We'll provide you templates to make it easy for you to do that, but just not belaboring the point or bearing the lead too much. Eye-catching, use any photos from last year that you may have, or the logo nice and prominent, just to make sure that people don't forget the email that you send them or get it confused with something else, I guess you'd say. Pyramid style is basically putting the most important information first, and then the least important information at the bottom. So for press releases and media advisories, you're going to lead out with the most important information. So what the event is, who's going to be there, and everything like that. And then any other sort of context details would go on the bottom, because not all reporters necessarily have time to make it to the bottom of a release. And then in terms of pitch style, you want to email first, and then wait, and then phone second. Oftentimes if you phone first, then they'll just say, oh, can you just send me an email? And that's the end of your conversation. But if you email first and you give them a chance to read it, then when you're following up with your phone call, you can say, hey, I sent you an email. And then they might say, oh, yeah, I did see that. That looked interesting to me. Can you tell me more about it? And that's the ideal sort of phone conversation that you want to have with the media. And then on messaging. So this is important to figure out. It's kind of a challenge to keep it simple because there's so many great things to say about EVs. But especially for TV, they're going to be maybe talking to you for 10 or 15 minutes, but they're probably only going to use about 10 seconds of what you say. They're going to distill everything down into a very small soundbite. So you want to make sure that you're keeping things simple enough that a TV or another reporter who doesn't have a lot of background on EVs will be able to understand you. Avoiding acronyms and very in-depth research memos, for example. I'm going to start out with your strongest statement and be really passionate and positive about solutions rather than getting mired in problems or controversy or anything like that. Just don't even bring those up. And also practice in advance. So if you or your spokespeople have been designated to be talking to the media, then just create a few simple messages that are local and strong and passionate, and just practice them in advance to give yourself a chance to put the message in your own words so that it really feels natural to you, but still on message as you're talking to folks. And then assemble your team. This is a really important aspect of putting on a media event. You want to make sure that you decide in advance who's going to be introducing officials and speakers and what they're going to be saying, what time they're going to be saying and everything. Who's going to be involved with the ceremony aspect, and making sure that they know exactly what to do and where to stand and everything like that. Who's going to be on task for taking the photos, and if there is going to be a photographer there, who's going to be the person to actually retrieve the photos in electronic files from the photographer, and who's going to be on task for doing the social media, so the live tweets and the posting if it's from an organizational account, making sure that you have all of the credentials and logins available on that phone, and that they have the permissions that they need to take the photos and send the tweets and everything like that. So this is a really important aspect that a lot of people overlook, but really great way to make sure that your whole event runs smoothly on the day of. So Lauren is going to be talking over the timeline for media outreach.
Hey guys, so for the timeline, about 4 to 6 weeks out, you want to send out calendar announcements, or you want to, get your event placed in local calendars. These can be with your local newspaper or online sites that have calendars. And these will include all of the information that the public will need. So not necessarily the media, but the public who will be attending the event. So you want to make sure that there's details such as if it's free, an RSVP link, parking, directions, all of those things. And if your event isn't open to the public, if it's invite only, then definitely skip this step, because you don't want other people coming in. But this is your first step to get the information out, is to just get the event out there so people are aware of it. Your next step is to send out your media advisory, which I'll go over in a little bit about how to draft that. But the media advisory is sent out about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. And that's sent out to the reporter list that we'll put together for you, that includes environmental reporters, auto reporters, and community reporters. And then again, 1 to 2 weeks later, you're going to, before your event, you're going to send out that advisory again as a follow-up, with a nice little note being like, make sure you saw this, wanted to know if you're interested in coming. These are the details of the event and the advisory. And then 1 to 2 days before your event, you're going to do your calls to these reporters. So you're going to call them and ask if they got your email, if they got the advisory, if they're interested in attending. And the reason you send this out a couple times, the reason why you send this out beforehand, is that reporters need to clear this with their editors before they come. So they need advance notice to get approval to come to your event and to cover your event. So this way, you're giving them multiple options to get this cleared, and then you're reminding them beforehand. Obviously, if they've already said they're going to come, you don't have to continue sending this to them. They'll be there if they said they're going to be there. But you do want to do those follow-up calls beforehand. If those are a big way to help get people to come if they haven't responded to your emails. So you want to do 3 to 4 weeks beforehand, you're going to do your advisory the first time, and then 1 to 2 weeks beforehand, you're going to do your advisory the second time, and then 1 to 2 days beforehand, you're going to do your calls to these reporters following up on these emails. And then you're sending these advisories through lists, media lists that we'll be putting together for you. It's a good idea to learn who the local reporters are that might be interested in covering your event, but the Sierra Club has also been tracking any EV-related news stories, as well as what media platform covered that story, the reporter who wrote it, and their contact information. So we'll have this for you about 8 to 10 weeks prior to the event. We track this info by state, and we'll share it with the city captains in each state. So if you see other reporters not on this list that are covering community events or auto events or environmental events or environmental stories, definitely add them to your reporter list, but we'll have most of them covered. So then the next step is actually crafting your media alert, crafting what you're going to send to these reporters. So these go in a specific order, but it's not, you don't have to worry. We have a template for you that's available on the National Drive Electric Week website under the resources. So you just have to fill in the blanks of the details of your event. But they go who, what, when, where, and the visuals. It's pyramid scheme, so you want to put your most compelling information up at the top in your little intro paragraph, and then go right into the specific details. And the visuals are also imperative to get TV reporters out there. If you want to be on the local news, you need to sell them on why it will make good TV. So if you're going to have hundreds of people looking at electric cars, if you're going to have a parade of electric cars down Main Street, if you're going to have a ribbon cutting with electric vehicles, just think about what would look good and put that in there. This is how you're selling your story to get people out to your event before it happens. So you really have to make it eye-catching, you have to make it interesting, you have to make it fun. So that's your media alert, and that's what you're sending out a couple times. That's what you're following up on before the event. And then on the day of the event, that's when you're handling all of your media day up. So to do that, you want to ID spokespeople ahead of time. It's good to have all of your people ready to go. It's good to have them prepped with talking points so that they know what they're going to say ahead of time, so they're not stumbling over their words, so that they know to keep it simple. You want to confirm that you want to confirm that you'll have interviews available on site, that there'll be a space for reporters to interview people there. You're going to want to confirm your setting and your spot for the interviews, the location. You're going to want something that has an interesting or something telling in the background, possibly, in the backdrop of EVs. You're going to want it to be quiet because you don't want a lot of background noise to be picked up. You want to be able to you want to be heard with what you're saying. And you should confirm that this spot that you're thinking of for the interviews will work for the reporter or the shooter when they arrive, but they might suggest something different. They might have something else in mind. They might not want to have the cars in the background. They might want to have something else. Or if it's raining, you might need to find a new spot if it's too noisy. If they have something else in mind, that's okay. Just go with it. It'll make it more likely that they'll put it on TV if they're happy with it. So just go with it, but have your talking points set, have your people set, be ready to be interviewed, as well as offer guided tours of the event or of the space, of the cars. Get your reporter interested in what's going on. This will help them write a more compelling, interesting story that'll tell a better story of your event, which will lead to a better piece. You want to have release waivers ahead of time so that everybody who you're having on camera is okay with being on camera. If possible, you want to provide high-res photos, videos, or B-roll to have available for the reporters in case they don't get what they're looking for. So have someone with a good camera or someone with a good video camera just taking things around your event. And then at the end of the event, pretty close to when it ends, you want to send out your press release and thank the media and the reporters who attended. And the press release will include quotes of people at your event or of the organizer from organizations of your event. This is what you send out immediately following your event to give something the reporters who were there can reference when they're writing your story in case they didn't get what they needed in the interviews, but it also gives something that the reporters who couldn't make it or who didn't go to your event, it gives them a story. It gives them something to write about. It says what happened. It gives quotes that they can quote in the story like they were there. It's a good way to secure media in case reporters didn't show, or in addition to if reporters showed. And so the next slide is how to write a press release. And we also have a template for this as well, so you don't have to fret about it. And this is also in the resources page. So this is, like I said, it's a more in-depth piece than the media advisory. It's because it's after the event has happened. So you're including details of what the event happened. You're including quotes from people who are there. We also have, it's the fill-in-the-blank style. So you just have to fill in, your city, your visuals. You can adapt the quotes a little bit. And adapt it to your event and what happened. but it's still, this one is a little more in depth, and it tells the story. It allows reporters to fill in the blanks in case they missed it, or to fill in the blanks if they were there, and or to sorry, or to if they didn't make it, to figure out all about your event and write a story anyway. But in case, and on top of that, a great way to get before and after your event is letters to the editor and op-eds. And this is a good opportunity because instead of a reporter writing your story, you're writing it. So a letter to the editor is shorter, and it's about 200 words, sometimes less, sometimes a little more. It's good to check with your local paper. And these, they're shorter. They're written by community people. It's about a 1 to 2 week lead time, so you should keep that in mind when submitting it. You can submit them before and after. It's a great way to get press leading up to your event, having people submit letters to the editors talking about how excited they are for National Drive Electric Week. And it's also a good wrap-up to the event about having letters to the editor in the paper about how much fun people had at National Drive Electric Week, or if they bought a car after National Drive Electric Week, or what they learned, what happened. And op-eds it's a longer piece. This is where you can tell the narrative you exactly want to tell. It's about 700 words, little more, little less, depending on the local outlet again. And it also has a 1 to 2 week lead time. And this is also a great way to get people to attend your event beforehand. If you can connect this to something in the news, you can hook that to National Drive Electric Week, and you can use that as a lead to get people to come to your event. If something happens with electric vehicles or with transportation in the national news or in the local level, if anything happens transportation or environmentally related, and you can figure out a way to hook it to electric vehicles or National Drive Electric Week, it's a good way to get it's a good way to get this in the paper, and it's a good way to get people to come to your event. And this also has a 1 to 2 week lead time, so keep that in mind when you're submitting it. And you can let the editor know in your pitch that of the date of National Drive Electric Week, and that you want this to be placed beforehand, because they're not going to want to place it afterwards, because they don't want to waste their time, placing something too late, because that doesn't make sense. And if it's after National Drive Electric Week and you're still keeping in mind the 1 to 2 week lead time, you can use this and you can write your piece about National Drive Electric Week and about your event using the details you have, beforehand, because you know what your event's likely going to be, and you can write about it. Again, maybe hooking it to something in the media, maybe not. Afterwards, National Drive Electric Week is a pretty good hook. But you can submit it before your event happens and say, this is the day of my event. I'd like this to run. This makes the most sense to run at this time. Are you interested? And they could run it after your event. So you can work with the lead times to your advantage. You can prepare and get things out ahead of time, so that you're not scrambling after the event has happened. And that's the same for letters to the editors and op-ed. They're both great before and after, and they're a good way to control your narrative. Unlike reporters who write the stories, they're controlling the narrative. You're providing the quotes and you're doing the best you can, but this way you're controlling every aspect of it, which is a great thing. So that's that type of media. So you have your media advisory, you have your press release, and then you have your letters to the editor and op-eds. And those are all great things, but what do you do if media doesn't show up on the day of your event? And that's okay. It happens. It's not the end of the world. You can control the media. You can be your own media. So take lots of photos. You can upload them to an online album. You can send the photos and release and quotes from the day to your media list for online stories. I wouldn't add them as an attachment, because that sometimes gets flagged as spam in the reporters' inboxes. So what I like to do is in the press release, I like to add a line that says, high-res photos or B-roll or whatever you have is available, so that they know. If you add them as an attachment, it sometimes gets flagged as spam, and they're less likely to see it, but they're less likely to open it, which is not great, because then it doesn't get read. But you can also be your own media outlet. We all are active on social media. We all are, attached to our phones. So post photos, post video to your phones, post blog posts to your own social media channels and the website. You can share that with your friends. Make sure other people see this. Just because media doesn't show, just because media doesn't write about it, doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean it's not out there. You can get the message out there. But on that note, on the social media note, MK and Mary are going to take over how social media works.
Nice. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks, Sian. So as we've mentioned in the past, we are working diligently. Even now, there's a great timeline earlier in this presentation about how to engage with media. But in terms of social media, you could start right this minute as soon as we hang up on this webinar call and start banging the drum on different social media platforms. And we'll kind of lay out a little bit for you the difference between the platforms, who the audiences are, and so on. But the very bare bones basics are we want to make sure that we include driveelectricweek.org in your social media posts and links. You can link directly to your event page by including the event number on it. You'll see that at the top of your event page in the URL. Each distinct event gets its own event number. And if you would be so kind, please tag us in your posts at Nat Drive Elect Week and on Instagram at National Drive Electric Week, and include hashtags NDEW 2017 and hashtag Drive Electric. And Mary has a good wrap for you later on why hashtags are so important. But I'll start with kind of the Facebook demographic discussion, which is pretty much in my wheelhouse. It's a fairly even age distribution of the audience. It serves as a home base for people on different platforms. So, for example, lots of folks may be posting multiple photos on Instagram, but they also use Facebook as kind of the repository for all of their other social media posts. So you might link up your Facebook and your Twitter and your Instagram, but Facebook is really kind of where stuff gets archived. And more recently, Facebook has offered a unique and kind of neat free video streaming service called Facebook Live. And it also archives your Facebook Live videos. So on your event Facebook page or on your organization's Facebook page, you can refer back to those videos and tag people in them. It's really important that you tag and appropriately thank any kinds of sponsors, folks that have come on behalf of your local elected officials or others who have supported the event and showed up, and even some reporters that might have shown up or not shown up but written stories. You can make sure that they're tagged in your Facebook posts as well. The beauty of it too is that you don't have to go overboard in terms of posting with any kind of regularity. You can definitely do 2 or 3 posts a day and not feel guilty like you're inundating people with requests to show up at the event. But it's always good in any case, any version of social media that you're using nowadays to include images and videos. And the good thing about National Drive Electric Week is there are plenty of opportunities to have neat pictures of cars, videos of people driving in cars. You know, we had some really good photos from a recent event with a bunch of kids that were climbing in the front what would be an engine compartment for a Tesla, but the kids were actually able to climb in there, and the parents were impressed because they thought, oh wow, we have 2 places to put luggage, or maybe some misbehaving children. Anyway, there's also plenty of opportunity to tag and again promote and acknowledge everybody's contributions to your effort as well. Twitter, I'm sure you're all familiar with, is not the flash in the pan that many of us thought it would be, and actually has a larger youthful demographic than Facebook. Almost half of the people who use it are under 34 years old, and the majority of them are perfect victims for the transition to electric cars. So it's a great audience, it's a great potential outreach and communicating with people. There's no limit to the number of times you can send out tweets, although we do recommend that you're making sure that you're curating whatever content you're promoting in a quality way, and I'm sure that won't be too much of a challenge. But with Twitter, it's not the same as Facebook. You could go out and send 15 or 20 tweets from the live event, or maybe even more. You can also broadcast video. You do have a maximum of 10 photos that you can tag, but otherwise hashtags are super helpful to widen audiences. And if you, in addition to using the NDEW 2017 and Drive Electric tags, if you want to use other trending tags that are related to clean technology or your local elected officials or other kinds of trending events that might kind of loop you into the network of the tweet storms that are going on, that would be helpful. And of course, there's an added bonus that Twitter has become a key platform for communicating between reporters and policymakers and their constituents and readers. So as we are witnessing now, even at the highest levels of government, some people are using Twitter to communicate directly with constituents, and reporters use it too to capture breaking news and identify trends. So it's still Twitter, no matter how much I think it's a flash in the pan, it's just going strong. So I'd like to hand over the mic for a minute to my colleague Mary, who is much more versed in the world of Instagram than I am. So Mary, take it away.
Cool, thank you, MK. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about the benefits of using Instagram specifically, and also some tips to keep in mind for how it can be a really good tool for widening your audience and getting some more supporters. And for those of you who are less familiar with Instagram, it is an app on your smartphone that functions basically as a digital photo album that people can view either by following you directly or by clicking on any of the hashtags that you use. And hashtag is the pound sign for those of us who are a little older. Same thing. Yeah, so with the first area that I'll talk about is the demographics. Instagram typically has younger demographics, but has a really, really wide audience. There's lots and lots of people that are on Instagram, and that number continues to just grow daily. They particularly have a wider number of analytics, or I'm sorry, the analytics show they have a wider number of women and people of color. So by using Instagram, you basically cast a more diverse net for potential supporters and attendees, which is really good because we're trying to educate the public about the awesomeness of EVs, and that's one good thing to keep in mind. And using Instagram and NDEW hashtags that we mentioned earlier on the earlier slide are also a really great way for us to see your photos in real time and also share them on our own social media accounts or on the NDEW website with your permission, of course. So that's something always to keep in mind too. The frequency of Instagram is also unique because there's really no limit to how many images you can post on Instagram and how many, and there's no, what's the term, like a diminishing return, I can't think of the term now, but the more photos that you post, actually the better it is. That's not the case for Facebook, for example. People get desensitized or annoyed if you post a lot of photos in one day, but Instagram, that's not the case. It's all photo based, and people know that there's going to be lots of photos if there's some exciting event happening. So go ahead and post away. And really, like I said, the more the better, because strings of photos will be sure to capture people's attention. And the other thing about frequency with Instagram is that it has unlimited hashtags. So you can post a photo and get really creative with all the hashtags that you want to use. The reason why hashtags are good is because it really widens your social media audience. Some examples that you can use are the obvious ones like NDEW 2017 and hashtag Drive Electric, but you can also just do more obvious ones like hashtag electric cars, or get creative. You can do hashtag addicted to oil, and people will know that this is one way to get off of your addiction to oil. You can do hashtag Trump or hashtag keep Santa Cruz weird or whatever you think will, if people click on it, they'll see your event and your photos and they may want to follow you or attend or learn more about how they can team up with you. So that's the scoop there on hashtags. Some other features with Instagram is you can do really short videos, up to a minute, I believe, which is really fun. You could take a short video of a notable speaker or an award that's being presented. You could also photo tag, I think up to 10 people or elected officials or utility companies or businesses or co-sponsors. You can do up to 10 photo tags, which is a really good way to also widen your audience, because when you tag people or businesses, the people who follow them will also see your photos. Some other features of Instagram is you can do well, there's some bonuses where you can have like an additional I don't know if they're like apps within the app, but hyperlapse is something where you can do really fast moving photos that are taken over long periods of time but are condensed down. So you could like take a photo of a bunch of people coming into your event and it'll show the crowd growing bigger and bigger as time passes on. You can also do boomerang, which is a fun little video feature where you do a quick video and it just boomerangs, so it goes forward and backwards over and over again, and it can be pretty funny. So yeah, so with that you can go to the next slide, MK. So here's a few tips on how to post really good content and make sure people see them. So definitely post iconic visual moments. Obviously landmarks or beautiful scenery is really good to capture, but also groups of people checking out the cars. This is great, and often it's so obvious that it actually gets overlooked a lot. If you notice people in a crowd and their faces and they're smiling, or even if they're just like asking questions and checking things out, definitely get those photos. Those are great photos. People are drawn to them and we can reuse them on all kinds of things. So get photos of people checking out cars or visiting the exhibitor booths. Those are always great. Also make sure to capture elected officials. If you have elected officials coming to your event, which is going to be great for media attention and also photo opportunities, definitely take photos of that, whether they're issuing a proclamation or even just shaking people's hands and connecting with people, or if they're in the driver's seat of an EV, excellent photo opportunity there. Ribbons being cut on charging stations, that's a really good photo opportunity. So whatever the highlights are of your event, definitely capture them. If there's any iconic visuals that are happening at your event or in the background, keep those in mind for your framing of your photos, and then just use the hashtags. In terms of targeting your audience, before your event, it's a really good idea to look up the social media handles of everyone who will be involved in your event. This is important because tagging these individuals or the groups or the companies will mean that all of their followers will see that they have been connected to your event. So it's definitely going to widen the audience of who is seeing your posts. And and just so you know, elected officials definitely will have a Twitter. I mean, I would be shocked if there's an elected official that doesn't have a Twitter. So just know that and do your homework beforehand. And businesses will likely have a Facebook for the most part, or even an Instagram. And if they don't have an Instagram, at the very minimum, they'll probably have a hashtag on Instagram. So you could always hashtag them if they don't have an actual account. Ways to boost your event that I don't think gets enough attention really by everyday folks that aren't like a company or a business is you're really able, if you can set aside some of the funds, you can pay to have your event be featured on Facebook. So it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's about $30 to as much as $100, but it really just depends on how big you want your audience to be. So how wide, like if it's a people in your immediate area or in like a larger region, then that will impact the price. And then how often that ad will come up, I believe, are the two factors there that determine the price. But it's a really good way to widen your audience to potential supporters and attendees in your area. So just keep that in mind. And then, of course, tracking all of this is really good and important because, well, let me just back up and define tracking. So tracking the public's engagement with your posts and your content will be through likes likes and through comments and shares and retweets. I think that's all of it. And so using the hashtags NDEW 2017 and hashtag Drive Electric will definitely be one way to track your posts, because we'll be able to see it and retweet it and share it. It's all going to be public. And also just really measure the reach that NDEW is having. But if you want something a little fancier, there's a website called Hootsuite, and it's free, I believe, and you can start an account and just connect your social media accounts to this platform called Hootsuite, and they'll be able to give you some really cool analytics. And you can also schedule ahead of time if you want to do posts on your social media accounts and not really have to be present with your phone or your accounts all day. You can do it weekly, actually, and then trust that they'll just go out in the scheduled times. So I think that's pretty much covers what I was going to mention. Yeah, and with that, we can take some questions from all of you. If you guys have any questions or need any clarifications on anything that we've covered so far.
I saw a question. It's a good one. Did you see it? There are actually a couple good questions. Let me read it to you. Give me a moment.
Okay.
I heard, bear with me. I've heard that one group last year had a special press-only test drive event a week ahead of time. That sounds like a great way to get press to show up. Any other thoughts on getting press before the event?
Yeah, that is a really, really interesting way to go about it. And if you, oftentimes the way to get public events is to have them, occur on a weekend or after work or something like that if you want to really get members of the public out. And often those hours don't really work for the media. And media tend to like to, have a little bit of a special experience, and they may feel that they have more time for interviews, that they maybe will have more time to get into cars themselves. They may even want to put a GoPro on the dashboard. A lot of TV stations have those as well. So, particularly if it's a new car or a new experience, then I think they'd probably appreciate something ahead of time as well. And then you can always save your release to go out on the day of the public event and maybe give it to them in advance and embargo it. But that would be up to the up to the whole NDEW comms team to decide whether or not to allow embargoes for releases.
Yeah, embargoes are just for people. There were a couple media pieces of jargon, and one person was asking what B-roll was. So could you explain, either Sian or Lauren, what B-roll is and whether or not you can get it ahead of time or if it's something that you're going to distribute afterwards? And then also elaborate a little bit about what an embargo means.
I can do that, yeah, sure. Unless, Sian, you want to take it?
I can take B-roll if you want to do embargo.
Sure.
So B-roll is basically the footage that that TV stations use in between the spokesperson interviews to kind of set the scene of their TV story. A lot of them gather it in advance, or they may have some existing B-roll if a car company or something sent it to them in advance. Typically, you don't really need to send them B-roll for something before a story has happened, unless it's B-roll that they wouldn't be able to capture in any other way. Typically, TV stations like to gather their own B-roll and use their own shooters to establish what kind of shoots and what kind of storylines they want to create themselves. But if you have something really rare, like underwater video footage or something that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise, then you can go ahead and send them B-roll footage. But otherwise, it's basically a term for the video footage that they're looking to gather to set the scene of their stories.
And then an embargo is what you send out. You can send something out to reporters before the event happens, and you can. And an embargo is when you tell them that they can't send this out or they can't release this information until a certain day and a certain time. So if you have information about your event, like say there's a proclamation or something and it hasn't, and you don't want that information out ahead of time, you want it to be released on that day, you can let the reporter know that, this information is happening, but it's embargoed until after the event. And that's a way to get them interested ahead of time. It's a way to get them to gather their story ahead of time. They can talk to you for more details. They can, write up their piece and then release it later. So it puts less pressure on them. It makes it less rapid response for them, but it also a way to get them interested beforehand. So an embargo is just a way to, you send things out before they're ready, or not before they're ready, but before they happen, with a date saying don't send this out until then. So you would say in the subject line and in the body of the email, embargoed until date and time, which is when they can release that information to the public.
Awesome. I'm learning stuff too over here. So what about if you have an opportunity to invite an elected official, do you guys recommend that you work with their press people ahead of time? If you're fortunate enough to get say a state senator or someone else to show up at the event, do you coordinate with them, their press folks ahead of time, just so that they know media will be there and schedules and all that jazz?
Definitely.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, reaching out to their press people in advance is really key, and oftentimes you won't be able to tell you until very close to your event if that elected is actually able to attend, because they need to just be on call for any other sort of emergency. So they may not even be able to tell you on the day of. But if you want to, let media know that hey, this media, this elected official may be coming, since you're going to be sending out materials a week or two in advance, you can say, Mayor so-and-so invited, or Governor so-and-so invited, so they can know that you have it in the works. And then when you're doing your pitch calls, you can say, oh, and hey, great news, we just heard that the mayor is going to be attending as well, or something like that.
And it's great to coordinate with them for the release you send out afterwards. If you do have elected officials there, I definitely coordinate with their press people to get them their quote in your release. It adds it adds an officiality to your event, and it makes it your press release much more interesting.
Yeah, and just another note that if you do have an elected official who's going to be, doing a speech or something like that, make it clear and know in advance whether or not they are willing to take questions, because you just want to make it clear to the media that you're pitching that they will or will not be taking questions, because oftentimes if they are willing to take questions, the media will lob over some other questions that are irrelevant to your event, some other recent controversy that they're just trying to get the mayor to speak about. And then your story ends up being about that instead of the event. So just something to be aware of, and to work with your press office, your local press office, to know, what's the go and no-go zone for your elected official in terms of remarks.
Oh, great advice. Great advice. Okay. I don't believe, did anybody else see any of your other questions? I think we're good. I'm able to wrap up here. There's one last thing I did want to share. After the event is over and you feel like you've gotten a couple good stories placed and you've gotten some great media coverage, do remember when you're finished to upload those links to your event page. That's where we can kind of keep a repository of all of the media coverage that happens all over the world now. As you know, National Drive Electric Week isn't purely national in the U.S. anymore. Now it's everywhere, which is awesome. So if you have the opportunity, when you've collected your stories and you've already tagged your sponsors and your elected officials in social media, if you could please upload them to your event page. That'll also help reporters looking on background, or people who are interested in maybe your sponsors or other folks that are involved. It's a good repository for ongoing stories. So unless anyone has any other questions, I think we'll wrap this up. No? Okay, it looks good. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, Kent asked if people are going to be able to access this information later on the website, and that's one good way to close us out, is mentioning, yes, all this information, all the templates that were referenced are available on the website, including the recording of this webinar. So if you go to National Drive Electric Week's website, you can go to the resources page, and all of the information here will be there. But if you can't find something or you need further assistance or support, just reach out to either myself, Mary, Lunetta at sierraclub.org. Email is right there on the screen, or MK, and her email is right there as well.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for coming, and thank you to our wonderful presenters as well. And we'll be in touch shortly with all of you city captains. Good night, everybody.
Bye.